This is what I would call a slow news week, when there's literally no good articles or news to talk about on the table. Oh, Polygon had an article talking about how Black Panther let me see myself as a superhero. Yawn. Congratulations, writer. We all have really bad childhoods and some of us just want to be like a kid again, right? Are there any good things to talk about for today? Guillermo del Toro won Best Picture for his OC/Martin Luther King fanfiction? The absolute madman! I wonder where he's taking his crazy pills from. No, seriously though, go see The Shape of Water even if you're not into that sort of thing. Anyway, what else? Ooh, this sounds fun. Here's an article from the official Wikia page, which they decided to call themselves Fandom now for some reason. I don't know why you have to call a website that is centered on wiki of everything Fandom. I mean, yes, it is in some ways accurate, but naming a big website out of an internet term just sounds a bit dumb. It's like calling a comedy show Rafflemau. So what does Wikia have for us today? Well, they're gonna talk about how SoulCalibur 6 plays well, but the female characters let it down. How? Well, let the first paragraph welcome you with its glorious arguments.
For gamers of a certain age, the SoulCalibur series holds an almost weaponized degree of reverence. Given its sword-clinging combat, there's no small trace of irony in that fact. Yet, with the last year's Tekken 7 raising the bar pretty spectacularly for 3D fighters, we were surprised to find that SoulCalibur's combat still feels just as sharp as it did 2 decades ago. Yet, where SoulCalibur 6 mechanics and presentations feel thoroughly modern and fresh, its representation of women is still disappointingly stuck in the past.
If you're gonna complain about something being stuck in the past, might as well complain about how the characters still use swords and dress up in medieval times. One of the most hilarious claims that this article makes is that SoulCalibur is one of those rare fighting game series where its lore is just as celebrated as the actual fighting itself. Now, I haven't played SoulCalibur, but knowing that SoulCalibur is from Namco, I don't think that the lore for this game is about as celebrated as the actual fighting itself. The reason why I doubt this statement is because it also says, just like Tekken. Tekken and lore are two things that do not go well with each other. I mean, can you please explain to me the storyline of the Mishima family from the very first Tekken without gouging your eyes out for how absurd and stupid that is? To the article's credit, it spends mostly talking about the actual game and how it progressed from the previous games. A lot of it is pretty boring and insubstantial, just like the Oscars, and especially the host. I am promised an article that tackles the dumbness on Ivy's costume, but I am instead given a very boring rundown of a game. Please give me something fun to tackle and enough materials to fill a 10-minute video. Otherwise, I have to find other materials to tackle and bore everyone to death for a couple more minutes. Now, this is what I'm talking about. 23 years since the original, not much has changed when it comes to pervy female design. Okay, article, what's your argument to counter this? And while we're at it, has anyone made articles about Tekken 7's pervy designs?
Yet this prequel approach isn't SoulCalibur 6's only piece of blatant fanservice, unfortunately. It's also a game which features that kind of fanservices too. Like its predecessors, Namco's latest isn't afraid of dressing its characters in some highly impractical outfits, with many of the female fighters designed from less of a male gaze and more of what feels like a drooling leer. Fan favorite Sophia once again bounces and jiggles around the arena in a skimpy skirt and revelatory blouse.
Okay, I think we should put up the warning signs here. Complaining about fan service is a good start, and then complaining about the male gaze is an even better continuation. The male gaze relies on this idea that men appreciating women's body is wrong because it will somehow encourage rape culture, which basically just like the arguments of how video games cause violence, except 10 times sexier.
While this is nothing new for the 23-year-old series, frankly, it all feels a bit embarrassing and slightly tone-deaf in 2018.
Ah, yes, the current year argument. It's a very interesting argument in which you can pretty much justify anything as long as you can say, because it's current year on the end. We don't need to have sexy characters in video games, it's 2018. I say, we don't need bloggers shoving their opinions down to people's throat, it's 2018.
To make matters worse, fighters can actually lose even more clothing as each battle unfolds. Once a player successfully lands one of SoulCalibur 6's screen-filling critical edge attacks, bits of the victim's armor is coming flying off. While it takes some time to reveal much of the male fighter's modesty, given most of the female character's lack of clothing to begin with, this unsurprisingly leads to some pretty extreme states of undress.
Please explain to me how that is not a great selling point for the game, for both the boys and the girls.
Since our demo, Namco announced the return of Ivy, and we genuinely don't know what armor she has left to be destroyed.
That makes it even better, doesn't it? It's like speculating about where Bayonetta 2's hair armor come from. You don't have to worry because the answer can be every bit as disappointing as that. And from that point on, there's nothing left. There's literally nothing else that the article talks about. This is only enough for at least 5 minutes of a video. What am I gonna do? Talk about other random topics? Fine, let's talk about some other random topics. In some ways, I'm starting to turn into Philip DeFranco for Tumblr news, and I think that's a good direction. And since we're done with the first topic, from there I want to share some stuff I love today. And today in Awesome, brought to you by Jason Lee, Victoria, and Metal Glasses for the pledges on Patreon. You guys are fantastic. Sometimes people exaggerate the importance of certain issues, like how you should apply at least a bit of a deodorant in order to not appear like the Führer's favorite pet. That's right, if you hate people that smell like the insides of your shoes, then that means you are leaning into the authoritarian side, and not because, you know, bad smell is bad. And how are we going to prove this matter? A 7-point scale survey spread online to 750 people. Journalism has gone to the point where unreliable surveys are capable of proving to the public whatever kinds of claims people want, like whether or not it's a good idea to make Nyarlathotep to be an anime girl. There was a survey done to quite a lot of Americans, and it turns out more than 50% of Americans believe that video games cause violence, which from what I've heard also use the 7-point scale that is open to abuse with leading questions.
Do you think there's a danger in giving young people guns and teaching them how to kill?
Yes.
Do you think it's wrong to force people to take up arms against their will?
Yes.
Would you oppose the reintroduction of national service?
Yes.
So there's nothing more bitter than finding out that certain studies, surveys, and polls can be abused into proving whatever ideas that you want. I can conduct a study in which men in general prefer 2D over 3D in order to justify my 2D women ethnostate. I can also use this study to justify my utter hatred and contempt to half of you Americans, which will eventually lead me into nuking you from orbit with extreme prejudice. But I'm still not sure what am I supposed to do with the Odour study. The only thing that this proves is the people on the left are smelly, disgusting, and should absolutely take a bath before the next 9/11 happens. But I don't believe that everyone on the left are smelly bunch, because my dad leans to the right and he's about as smelly as the insides of my shoes.
We tell young girls they can make video games, but all the YouTube tutorials for Unity, etc. are hosted by men. Female developers are found giving women in games talks. Any resources for less male-centric game development tutelage?
Look, I know that watching videos of a bunch of losers flexing their C-sharp skills to the world is very painful for a verified account like you, but at least you're not being tasked to figure out ways to assassinate Koro-sensei. But what truly bothers me wasn't this tweet. Actually, to say that this tweet bothers me is an overstatement. It bothers me about as much as the smell of my own socks, which is to say, not really. What bothers me is this reply from Anon on Reddit.
If that's what's stopping you from being a dev, you probably didn't want to be one anyway. However, there's a benefit to having some representation by women in this area, wouldn't you agree? People aren't perfect, and when someone teetering on the edge of interest in development feels like they aren't in a club, they might shy away from it, which leads to a reinforcement of the representation of the current club. It's a vicious cycle.
Anon, for the record, I used to be very invested in a fanfiction community, and they're all populated by girls being horny about 3D boys bonking each other out. I wholeheartedly disagree with them, not because I find fanfiction works to be not for me, but I disagree in that I find 2D boys to be 10 times more attractive than their 3D counterparts. And that is exactly the primary reason why I hide myself behind a 2D avatar, with the other reason being reading my lines are much better than memorizing it. But that's not my point. My point is, to describe someone who quits game development because their tutors are men as not perfect is like saying the Titanic has some minor flaws with the tiny cracks in the bottom of their ship. What an exquisite euphemism that you have in there to hide the fact that there are some serious issues that need to be addressed, like the utter contempt towards men that this user has. If we're gonna talk about how the atmosphere of game development is unwelcoming for women, I think you should go back to writing fanfictions. And I'm not saying that out of spite, I'm saying that because that's the only place that I think you'd find more comfort at. You are clearly not interested in game development, and you're only interested in it because that's what the cool kids like these days. I'm interested in fanfictions, and if any of you guys look at me weird, I will throw my latest Mario Wario Yaoi. Jesus Christ, that's hard to say. How about you get out of game development because it's clearly not for you, and stay true to your passion of bonking bishonets in a bedroom with beloved and blissful BDSM. Oh, speaking of the fanfiction community, Mary Sue. Oh, Mary Sue. How in the name of God can you never stop being hilarious? Mary Sue decided to write an article about men writing fanfictions. Now, the article starts off talking about a guy who claims that his fanfiction work is academic, which I cannot believe that I can be on the same page as Mary Sue. But then again, Mary Sue also have their shares of broken clock is right twice a day moment. No. What I want to talk about is fanfictions written by men. I know that most fanfictions are written by women and most of them are pretty bad, which is the rule of law of fanfictions in general anyway, not just those written by women. But the ones that are good are pretty freaking amazing. It's just that you need to get through the absolute trifles to actually find the ones that are not just the author masturbating to their favorite characters. But somehow Mary Sue found a way to excuse this blatant insult to literature. At least 90% of them anyway.
Fic is primarily created by women, transgender, queer, and just plain queer people for free, for each other, and as such it's often derided and dismissed. Made mostly by girls, for no profit or acclaim, must be amateurish and trashy, goes much of the knee-jerk response you get when you mention fic to people in the mainstream.
Oh man, I think you should absolutely listen to the masses because they are right to say that your fanfictions are garbage. The article spends mostly talking about how one guy says that his fanfiction is academic, therefore all guys say that their fanfictions are academic. Mary Sue, I agree that I wouldn't call the remnants of my 17-year-old self to be absolute masterclasses of literature, but you seem to make this a men issue rather than some random dork who claim his fanfiction to be an academic work issue. You know what's the funniest thing that I've seen out of this article? Mary Sue decided to back up the assertion that what the guy is writing is fanfiction by citing a fan studies scholar. Fan studies scholar. People can have degrees in fanfiction studies right now. Oh man, my life is wasted studying about computers and androids and Java and C# and Unity. I want to spend more time in fanfiction studies. Out of interest, when will the meme studies come into play? An interesting statement that comes out of this fanfiction scholar is that critiques of fanfiction is generally rooted in misogyny and racism, lady. Don't forget the horrendously racist fanfiction reviews that I got for simply having terrible grammar. But seriously though, to say that fanfiction criticisms are rooted in misogyny is about as credible as saying you hate the new Ghostbusters just because there are women in it.
Tired of male writers, because it is almost always male writers receiving serious lengthy interviews like this about their fanfiction, when these female and trans and genderqueer and queer-dominated communities do not field many requests to explain how Roland Barthes influenced the latest chapter of their popular fic, which is more than 100,000 hits on it, by the way.
So, you're jealous that a guy made a fanfiction and become very successful at it? Out of interest, Mary Sue, have you ever heard of 50 Shades?